Animals that have been declared extinct, some for millions of years, suddenly turning up alive. A giant prehistoric fish swimming through deep ocean caves. A long-lost bird suddenly walks out of the mountains. A giant insect survives on a tiny rock above the ocean. And a creature lost for 170 plus years is caught on camera in the wild. These are animals that were declared extinct until someone recorded them alive. In the remote mountains of New Zealand's South Island, locals spent decades debating whether a massive, flightless bird called the Takahē was still around. These were, or I guess are, bright, colorful birds with blue and green feathers. By 1898, after 4 known specimens were collected and predator populations exploded, they officially wrote the species off as extinct. But a doctor named Geoffrey Orbell refused to accept that verdict. He spent years studying historical sightings and mapping out unexplored valleys, and in November of 1948, Orbell led a small team high up into the Murchison Mountains, near a remote glacial lake, and as they explored deeper and deeper into the brush, they eventually noticed fresh bird tracks. And then there was an unfamiliar call, and wouldn't you know it, moments later they came across a small group of living Takahē. Orbell captured 2 of the birds, captured some photos, and then released them back into the wild. The story made headlines because nobody had expected such a large bird to go unnoticed for 50 years. Today, predators have been kept in check, and we also have conservation programs and sanctuaries, which has all helped their population recover to around 500 birds. Off the coast of Australia, there's this giant pointy volcanic rock sticking straight out of the ocean called Ball's Pyramid. Looks like a place where nothing could possibly live, but back in 2001, a team of scientists climbed the steep cliffs to solve a pretty strange mystery. See, decades earlier, back in 1918, a ship ran aground on nearby Lord Howe Island and rats escaped onto the land. Didn't take long for these rats to wipe out island's native giant stick insect, often called the tree lobster. As the nickname suggests, these things were huge, about 6 inches long, but by 1930 they were sadly extinct, or so everyone thought. Because in the 60s, some rock climbers on Ball's Pyramid said they saw dead insect shells sitting near a bush high up on the cliff. Years later, researchers decided to climb up at night with flashlights to check that exact shrub, and hanging under that one plant, 25 feet above the waves, they found 24 living tree lobsters. They took 2 pairs back to the Melbourne Zoo to start a breeding program. One of the males, which they named Patrick, ended up fathering thousands of eggs, bringing the whole species back from the edge of extinction. Fernandina Island in the Galapagos is basically a giant active volcano covered in rough black lava. It's super tough to walk on, which is probably why scientists hadn't seen its local giant tortoise species in over 100 years. Up until recently, the only proof this specific tortoise ever existed was a single male collected back in 1906. But in 2019, an expedition team decided to explore a few isolated patches of vegetation, and after hours of hiking and heat that was almost unbearable, their tracker spotted old droppings and some chewed up plants. They followed the trail and ended up finding an old female tortoise hiding under a bush. She was pretty thin, clearly having a rough time finding food on lava, but she was alive. They named her Fernanda, put her in a crate, and took her back by boat to a breeding center on a neighboring island. Scientists at Yale tested her DNA and confirmed she matched that 1906 specimen, so the species had been surviving on that active volcano for over a century without anyone noticing. Back when European sailors first visited Bermuda in the 1500s, the night sky was packed with seabirds called cahows. The birds made these weird, loud calls at night, which actually spooked the sailors so much they called the place the Isle of Devils. But when people settled there, they brought with them invasive animals like pigs, rats, and cats, which ruined things for the birds. They dug up the birds' burrows, ate their eggs, and by 1620, the cahow had completely vanished. And people assumed that they were gone for good for over 300 years. It wasn't until 1951 when a team of researchers decided to check some tiny rock islets just off the coast. Joining them was a 15-year-old local kid named David Wingate. As they reached down into dark rock crevices on these barren rocks, they pulled out an actual live cahow. They ended up finding 18 nesting pairs barely surviving. right above the waterline. Wingate ended up making it his life's mission to save these things. He made burrows, cleared out predators, and planted native trees, helping the population grow from 18 pairs to over 100 today. For a really long time, scientists only knew about the Chacoan Peccary from ancient fossilized bones. They grouped these pig-like animals in with Ice Age fossils and figured they died out thousands of years ago, but nobody bothered to ask the indigenous people living in the Gran Chaco region of Paraguay. They knew the animal really well, called it the tagua, called it the tagua, and had actually been hunting it for food for generations. In 1975, an American scientist named Ralph Wetzel went out into the Paraguayan bush after hearing rumors about an unusual wild pig. Driving down dusty dirt roads through thick prickly plants, his team finally saw whole herds of them running around. The Chacoan Peccary turned out to be the biggest of all peccary species. It managed to hide from modern science simply because they lived in an unbelievably hot, dry, and thick forest that researchers just rarely visited. Back in 1859, a famous explorer named Alfred Russel Wallace found the world's largest bee on an island in Indonesia. He described it as a huge black insect, about the size of a human thumb with giant jaws like a beetle. After he found that one, the bee pretty much vanished. Entomologists looked for it for decades without any luck, and as the forests got cut down, most people figured that it was extinct. Cut to January of 2019, when a photographer named Clay Bolt joined a small team to search the North Moluccas Islands. They spent days walking through scorching hot rainforests, checking termite nests hanging in the trees. Why termite nests? Because the female giant bees use their big jaws to scrape sticky resin off trees and line their tunnels inside active termite mounds. On the very last day of their trip, after checking tons of empty nests, their guide spotted a small hole in a termite mound about 18 feet up. Bolt climbed a small ladder, shined his flashlight inside, and wouldn't you know it, he saw a giant female bee looking right back at him. He got the first photos and video ever taken of a live one, proving that they were still out there. The night parrot of Australia is almost like a ghost story among birdwatchers. Unlike pretty much every other parrot you've ever seen, or heard of I guess, this little green and yellow bird only comes out at night, spending its whole day hiding in the thick, spiky grass of the outback. European explorers found a few in the 1800s, but once feral cats and foxes spread across Australia, the bird seemingly vanished, and by the mid-1900s, people called it extinct and it became known as one of the hardest to find birds on the planet. Decades went by with nothing but rumors, maybe the occasional dead bird found on the side of the road, but that changed in 2013. A naturalist named John Young spent years tracking calls out in the Queensland outback, slowly narrowing down their location, and eventually he found a tiny group living in massive clumps of grass. He managed to get super clear photos and a little bit of video of a live night parrot sitting on a branch. It was the first solid proof in over 100 years that the bird still existed, which led to big private nature reserves being set up to protect them. Up in the remote mountains of Indonesia lives an animal that looks like a total mashup of different species. Attenborough's long-beaked Echidna is an egg-laying mammal for starters, which is kind of weird. It also has spines like a hedgehog, a long snout like an anteater, and feet like a mole. Scientists only documented it once, way back in 1961, and then didn't see another one for over 60 years. Most researchers worried it was gone for good, but in mid-2023, a team from Oxford University teamed up with some villagers to launch a month-long expedition into the Cyclops Mountains. And how cool would it be to say you went on a mission done for a long-lost bird in the Cyclops Mountains? Anyway, they hiked through the tough terrain to set up over 80 camera traps across the peaks, and for weeks those cameras picked up, well, almost nothing. But then, on the very last day of the trip, while checking the memory card from the final camera they picked up, they saw it. Clear video of a long-beaked echidna walking through the dead leaves. It was the first live photo evidence ever recorded of the species. Sometime in the mid-1800s, a single stuffed bird was shipped off to a museum in the Netherlands, caught somewhere in Indonesia. It was named the black-browed Babbler, a small brown bird with a black stripe running right across its eyes. For the next 172 years, nobody ever saw a single live one. It became Asia's longest lost bird, and bird experts basically gave up hope. But then in October of 2020, two men in Borneo were out in the forest gathering supplies when they spotted an unusual bird hopping through the bushes. They managed to briefly catch it, took a couple quick photos with a smartphone, and let it go right back into the woods. They sent those pictures to a local birdwatching group, who passed them along to some experts, and scientists could not believe it. This was a living black-browed babbler. It had bright maroon eyes that nobody had ever seen before because the old museum specimen had faded. A follow-up team went out later and actually filmed them in the wild, confirming the species had been living in the Borneo rainforest the entire time. For over 60 million years, everyone just assumed the coelacanth was gone for good. A lot of people, most people, probably didn't even know it existed. Science only knew this fish from old fossils, so the official story was that it died off right alongside the dinosaurs. But that all changed 4 days before Christmas in 1938. A young museum curator in South Africa named Marjorie Courtney Latimer got a call from a local fishing captain. He'd just come back to port and told her she should look through his latest catch to see if there was anything interesting for her museum. While digging through a pile of sharks and rays, she noticed a strange pale blue fin. She pulled out this massive 5-foot fish covered in thick armor-like scales with fins that almost looked like legs. She had no idea what she was looking at, so she drew a quick sketch and sent it to a fish expert named J.L.B. Smith. And when he saw the drawing, he immediately recognized the unique fins. It was an animal thought to be extinct since the Cretaceous period. Later on, researchers found out that fishermen over in the Comoro Islands had actually been catching these fish every once in a while for generations, just cooking them up without realizing they were pulling living fossils out of the water. And that has been the video for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.